part 2 of 7.2. So now we've looked at some of the terminology associated with weighted voting, some of the different things that might happen in terms of dictator, veto power, dummy, etc. We're going to look at power indexes, and we're going to look at two, the Banzhaf and Shapley-Shubik. The Banzhaf uses the idea of coalitions where players can join together to pass a measure. And you first have to figure out how many coalitions are possible, thinking about all the different ways that people could get together. And you have to note that a single player can form a coalition. It can be a coalition of one. A dictator might do that. Then you have to figure out each coalition's voting power using the weighted system and determine if the coalition is a winning coalition. So in Banzhaf, it's all about seeing who's winning, what group of people or single person can win, can pass the vote, meet the quota. And then finally, you have to figure out if there is a critical player in each coalition. A critical player is someone who, if they leave, the coalition then becomes a losing coalition. So it went from winning to losing if one player or a particular player, a critical player, leaves. So once you get all this information together, then you apply the following formula to find each player's Banzhaf power. So for a player P sub I, you have B sub I over T. And B sub I is the number of times a player was critical. So after you look at all the winning coalitions, and that's in this one, we really want to worry about the winning ones. You look at the winning coalitions, you see which players are critical. If you take them out, does it change from winning to losing? And at the end of the day, once you've got all the coalitions there that are winning, you've figured out all the critical players, the number of times a certain player is critical would be their B value. And then T is just the total number of times all players are critical. And there can be repeats. So maybe player 1 was critical in 3 different coalitions. Well, you would count them for this total 3 times. So let's go ahead and see an example of this. And I want you to find the Banzhaf power index for each player. And I will go ahead and show you how to do that. So with this one, it's all about winning. Banzhaf is all about winning up front. You're looking at winning coalitions and listing those out first. So I do have to go through and kind of think about all the possible coalitions as I get there. But the first thing I do is I look at the single players and I ask myself, is there any one player who can meet the quota alone? No. 7 isn't enough, 6 isn't enough, 2 isn't enough. So there won't be a winning coalition with a single player in it. Then I move to the pairs. And in this case, if player 1 and player 2 join together, they would win. 7 and 6 is 13. Meets the quota. They're a winning coalition. If I put player 1 and player 3 together, 7 and 2 is 9. That's not enough to meet the quota. If I put player 2 and player 3 together, it's only 8. Not enough to meet that quota. So there's only one winning coalition with 2 players in it. So then I move to all 3, and all 3 had better win. Your total vote had better be enough to meet that quota. So player 1, player 2, player 3, if they get together and form a coalition, it will certainly win. If it's unanimous, they're going to win. And now I look at the critical players in each of those coalitions. So in the first winning coalition, if player 1 leaves, takes their 7 votes and walks away, player 2 is sitting there like, I only got 6 votes. I can't pass. So player 1 was critical to the success. If they leave, the coalition goes from winning to losing. Player 2 is also critical because if player 2 gets up and says, hey, I'm out of here, taking my 6 votes with me, player 1, left there alone, can't pass it on their own. So both players are critical in that winning coalition. In the second one, with all 3, if player 1 leaves, not enough votes with player 2 and 3 left there. So player 1 was critical there too. Player 2, also critical. If player 2 leaves that 3-person coalition, takes their 6 votes, player 1 and player 3 alone, or I guess together, can't pass that measure or any measure. So player 2 is also critical. Player 3, though, if player 3 gets up and is like, hey, I'm going to leave, player 1 and player 2 are like, okay, whatever, we still got 13 votes. Bye, player 3. So player 3 is not really critical in that 3-person coalition. So now, once you have listed the winning coalitions, determine who was critical, who, if they leave, it goes from winning to losing. You then focus on this little grouping right here. And the power index for player 1, I see 4 players listed total. Remember, repeats are okay. So the denominator is going to be 4. And then player 1 showed up twice, so their B value would be 2. And you get 1/2 is their power index. So this is their B, B sub 1, and this is the total. Player 2, same total. Once you find the T, it's going to be the same all the way across, so that's still going to be 4. Player 2 showed up twice, so the B sub 2 is 2. And you reduce that, you get 1/2. That would be their power. Player 3, still have a denominator of 4, but they didn't show up at all in the critical player list. 0, so 0 power. And player 3 would be a dummy. They have no power. So that's what I mean when I was saying earlier, you'll be able to tell that they're a dummy just by their power index value. And if it's 0, they have no power, they're a dummy. Okay, so that's Banzhaf. Let's take a look at Shapley-Shubik, if the screen will let me. All right, so Shapley-Shubik uses the idea that the order in which a player joins the coalition is important. So whereas Banzhaf, you were just looking for all the ways that you can make winning coalitions. Didn't matter what order they joined. It was just like, hey, player 1 and player 2 are in there. Together they got enough. Well, they're a winner. Good to go. You list them down. But Shapley-Shubik, you're going to have to list out every possible order of the coalition or coalitions, and then see as you go through the list when it switches from losing to winning. So whereas Banzhaf was all about winning and then looking to see who was critical to keep it from losing, Shapley-Shubik, it's kind of the opposite, where it's like, oh, we start out and it's losing. When does it become winning? So that's going to be a key thing to keep in mind. And when the order in which a player joins is important, this is called a sequential coalition. And if a player joining the coalition switches the coalition from losing to winning, the player is a pivotal player. They pivoted it from losing to winning. After you've listed every possible coalition, you then count how many times a player is pivotal and divide that by the total number of sequential coalitions. And that will get you your Shapley-Shubik power index. So the Player I, it's going to have a fraction still. S sub I is how often the player was pivotal. So S1 would be for player 1, S2, player 2, etc. And then you divide by n factorial. N is the number of players, n factorial is the number of sequential coalitions. It's kind of like the permutation concept that we saw before. Order was important. So n factorial is going to tell you the number of orderings for the number of players. And this number gets very, very large very fast. And there's some software out there that can handle this with bigger amounts. In this class, you won't be seeing, I don't think, more than 3, 4 at the most. But let's look at an example here, and you should probably try this. Okay, so basically we got 13, then 7, 6, 2. So the quota, and then weight 1, weight 2, weight 3. So first thing I'm going to do is find this n factorial. This is going to tell me 2 things. And in this case, the n is 3. There were 3 players, 3 weights. 3 factorial is 6. So what this tells me is the denominator for my power index will be 6. Also, it tells me how many orders I'm going to have of those 3 players. So the way I like to do this, and they use a little different bracket than what they use for the Banzaf, I start out with just player 1, player 2, player 3. Just put them in increasing order with their subscripts. Then I say, okay, well, player 1 starts out still. I could switch the order of player 3 and player 2 to that. So that's 2 of the orderings. And now I'm going to start with player 2 because I've got all the possibilities for starting with player 1 listed in those first 2. Then if player 2 starts, I'll do player 1, then player 3, just, the order after player 2 starts. And then player 2 could start again, and then player 3, and then player 1. And that's both the possibilities with player 2 starting. And then player 3 could start. We could have player 1, then player 2. And then last but not least, we're on the 6th one now. Player 3, then player 2, then player 1. So you have to list all these out for the Shapley-Shubik. All 6. We got 6 here. The n factorial tells you how many. And these would be the sequential coalitions that would be in play. So now we look at the pivotal players. Who's pivotal in making it switch from losing to winning? So as I go across here in the first one, player 1, 7 votes, not enough to meet the quota of 13. Player 2 comes in with their 6. 6 and 7 makes 13, makes it a winning coalition. Player 2 is pivotal. Move to the next ordering. Player 1, 7, not enough to meet the quota. Player 3 comes in with their 2. 7 and 2 is 9, still not enough. Player 2 comes in with their 6, makes it go over the quota, so they were pivotal. They switched it to winning. Move to the next one here. Player 2 with 6, not enough. Player 1 comes in with their 7. Well, that's enough. So player 1 was pivotal. And then player 2, not enough. Player 3 joins in, still not enough. Player 1 joins in, that was enough to make it a winner, so they were pivotal. Then player 3 starts, player 1 comes in, not enough. Player 2 joins, now it's a winner, so player 2 is pivotal. And then player 3, again, not enough. Player 2, still not enough. Player 1 joins. Now they have enough. So for player 1, their S sub 1 would be equal to 3. They showed up 3 times here in the list of pivotal players. Denominator was 6. That's that n factorial. And oops. So you reduce that, you get 1/2. Player 2, they were also 3 times in the list of pivotal players, over 6. So they're S sub 2 here, n factorial again here. Also 1/2. And then player 3, they didn't show up at all in the list of pivotal players out of the 6 times. So they were a 0 again. Still a dummy, the S3 here, not enough. So Still a dummy, no power. And if you have questions, ask.